Hello and welcome back to 3D Drawing for Model Railway. In today's episode I've got an update about the test print we've done with the whole model. Obviously, as I say, it's 2 prints, so it's taken me a few days to get it printed. There's some really good positives that have come out of it, and there's a couple of things I'm going to change to try and hopefully get better results for the next one, and obviously, fix some of the issues that I've encountered. So if I jump across to the photographs to show you what it looks like. So here you can see a general view of the model. You can see I've put it in line with a class 33 here, so give you some sort of idea of the height, so that looks about the right height. The first issue you can really see though is with the cab. It doesn't really sit on the body too well. I've used some small brass self-tap screws that I've got that I gave enough room in there for a little bit of play, but I think there's a bit too much. So what I'm going to try and do is try and fix this lean, and to obviously keep the pivot is I'm going to try and draw the pivot with its own pin that I've drawn on there, rather than trying to use a proprietary item like a brass. Similar issue here with the cradle, although the cradle sits much better because the centre of gravity is pretty much where the pin is. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create a pin myself and print it off that will sit in there. So looking at the pictures, you can see that white resin isn't the greatest of resins to get detail to show up on photographs, but I've tried my best with these next few photographs to try and show that I haven't cleaned up the print, so you can see these little nodules here where the supports were. I haven't done any filing at all on here yet to clean it up, but you can see on here how the cable ductings come out perfectly fine. All the rivets are there, although you can't really see them particularly well in the resin. The detail around the axle boxes you can see has come out. Some of the detail around the crane here, you've got a little light here. This has caused a bit of a problem here. It's a little bit weak on the jib. I'm going to just, it's snapped on here, so I'm just going to re-glue that myself on here, and hopefully that should be fine. If I was to print more, I might make this support just a little bit bigger. Here again, you can see the detail on here. The gears on the pivot and the rollers have come out absolutely fine. They look good. The support around the pulleys up here has come out okay. This one's showing you the lifting arm, how the lifting rings have come out. Again, the detail doesn't show up particularly well on white resin. With camera, it just doesn't clearly show up particularly well. But both of the shackles have come out on both sides. You can see on the buffer beam here how these shackles here have come out okay. Buffers are fine. The brake rigging looks good. This video here is just a small video. I'm going to play this now. You can see how the couplings have worked. So for me, that's plenty of room to play here. Potentially maybe just a little bit too much. I'm just going to close up these two little pins here that stop the couplings on these two rotating quite so much. But in general, that system's worked absolutely fine. One other issue I've encountered that's going to mean I need to reprint the whole of the runner wagon is, I'm not sure why I completely forgot about it, but I haven't put any recesses in here for the flanges on the wheels, so the wheels don't actually fit in height wise. I'm going to change the CAD just to put a couple of recesses for the wheels, and I'm probably going to make the W irons just that little bit taller to give a little bit more room here for the wheels. But other than that, it actually, it sits absolutely fine. All the wheels in here are nice and free rolling. I've pushed this backwards and forwards on the layout here. It goes through the points absolutely fine. Once I've got the runner wagon reprinted and it can all go as one, I'm going to drop it around to a mate who's got a roundy that's actually wired up, and we can get it to go around to test how it goes around corners, whether the jib works okay on the corners, which I can't see any issue why it wouldn't, but it's just I'd rather be going around there because he has got, as I say, that roundy that's wide, whereas my large round layout hasn't been wide yet, so unfortunately I can't run trains on that. But I have been able to shunt this chassis backwards and forwards on here. Okay, so if we jump into Fusion, as I say, I'm going to make a few changes. So first one, I'm going to just hide some of these bodies. I'm going to look at the pivot to start with. So if we look at the bottom of the pivot, the hole that I created on here, we've got a radius of 1.2 millimeters. So, and I designed this to have a metal pin that comes through, but unfortunately, as I say, it's just got a little too much play in there, and it's allowed the crane body to rock backwards. So I'm going to try just printing the pin. I've done this on one of my other models. It works okay. I just thought maybe going for a metal one might have been a better option. But I'm going to change this to try and improve this. So if I just search in the sketch history here, and what we're looking at is, yeah, we've got a 2.4 hole here. So I'm going to just change this ever so slightly to 2.3, and then I'm going to jump forward in the history. Finish sketch first, that'll help. Jump forward in the history. So that's just made that hole just a little bit smaller. But rather than just doing the hole here, in fact, let me just check actually. If I do the look at the chassis now, will that have made that hole smaller? Yes, it has. That's not what I want. Okay, so let's go back to 2.4. Okay, so I'm going to change this now slightly. Jump through the history, make sure I'm at the very end because I don't want to make any changes to anything else. I'll come back to the pivot, and I'm going to create a sketch on this top surface here. And the first thing I'm going to do is draw a circle that's going to be 2.3 millimeters in diameter. So I've now got essentially three holes here. I'm going to first of all extrude that little extra bit there. And I'm going to take that all the way through the model, so that's now solid. I'm then going to take the inside profile. Okay, let that finish. And let's have a look at that sketch again here. Turn that back on. I'm going to take the inside profile here, and I'm going to extrude that. So I'm going to be coming downwards on here, so I'm going to turn the chassis on so I can see the chassis. I'm going to extrude this all the way as far into this model as I dare take it without interfering with where the wheel and the axles were going to be. I actually think, looking at the line of the axles, I could probably come down just a little bit more, maybe another millimetre there. So it's coming down into it 8 millimeters. That's going to fill in that hole, create that little bit more sturdiness there. And because it's only 0.1 of a millimetre, that doesn't sound like a lot. If it's a little bit too tight, I can just run a small drill through that hole, just open it up a little bit. But hopefully, with being that tight, it will stop the crane being able to rock and droop backwards on the pivot here. The other option I would have would be adding a small bit of weight to the front of the crane body. There's some, obviously we've got a hole in here that we can turn off the pivot and the chassis. If we look inside, we've got a little bit of hole in here. I could add a little bit of metal inside here just to add a little bit of forward balance to the body there. Okay, so the next thing that we need to look at was for the runner wagon. So it's going to have a look underneath the runner, and I'm going to make some changes under here. So if we look at the history right at the very end, we've combined the W-line. So having those separate all the way to the end is going to enable me now to make changes to those W-lines without, especially the height of them, without causing an issue for the rest of the wagon. Before I do that though, what I'm going to do is just make a couple of recesses above them. So we're going to be looking at creating those recesses. Get it back. exactly where I want it. Recesses underneath here, in the bottom of the wagon here, just so that the wheels have got that little bit more room to free roll. Now, if you remember, we said we've got 6.1mm axles. So theoretically, from the midpoint here upwards, we're going to need to have 3.1mm. Sorry, 3.2mm to have enough room to be able to spin the wheel correctly. Okay, so if I just go through the history here and look for our mirror objects, where we've mirrored the body over. Let's just jump back to here on the history marker. Okay, so we've got it where we've moved the W irons here. Let's check that. That's where we moved the W irons, and then we removed all of the rivets and things down. I'm just going to go. Oops, didn't mean to do that. That's annoying. I'll come back to there. Oh, history marker there, I think it's. Nope, it's further back than that. Oh, it is there. So at this point here, we've got everything symmetrical on the wagon. What we're going to do is spin this round, create a couple of recesses here for the wheels. As if we inspect from, actually I need to project. If I create a sketch first of all, and then project that circle onto that sketch, we can then measure. If you look at the dimension from that point to there, we've only got 2.7mm. So we need to obviously create a bit of extra space there. If we measure from there to, from that circle to this line here, we've got plenty of room at that point. That's 3.6mm, so there's absolutely fine. If that continues upwards, then we know we'd probably have enough room in there for the wheel. So if we take that as a simple way of doing this, finish that sketch. I'm just going to delete that because obviously we don't need that sketch there. And if we create a new sketch on this front surface here. So we know we've already got this line coming up, so we might as well just use that line and continue that up with it. And then across. I'm actually going to extend that a little bit further, like that. More than enough room there. Now if we project that circle, we can then measure that and inspect from the middle of the circle to the top of the line there. There you go, 3.9mm. There's ample room. As we said, the wheel itself is only 6.1. So theoretically, that just doing that should be enough to create that space that we require. So if we do the same on the other end down here, if we extrude that first of all, actually, I'm just going to extrude that to maybe minus 6.2mm. Now I might go a little bit more actually, 6.4. Okay, so we've got to do the same on this end here. So if we create a sketch on that surface, it's going to use a rectangle at this end. There's no point overcomplicating it. We're trying to do those triangles. So we've just got that rectangle. If we project the circle, and then we can inspect to make sure that will give us enough room. So from there to there, 4.2. And again, we're looking at more than enough room there. Okay, I might actually just bring that down ever so slightly. Just check that again. So from there to that line, make sure that's measuring in the right place. Yep. So 4 millimeters. That's plenty of room there. So if we extrude that to the same distance as that one there, click on OK. So we've now basically got those little cutouts underneath, which is hopeful. Actually, this might be an issue, so I'm just going to change that. Let's go back into that sketch. I'm just going to draw this line just a little bit further up, so that's actually supported there. Finish the sketch there. Okay, so we know we've got plenty of room in there now, and you know, wheels will fit and rotate absolutely fine. Okay, so having made those changes, the next thing I need to do is reprint these parts. So just going to go back through the process again. I'm going to select the main chassis here. Oh, actually, that needs to combine. Let's just skip the history forwards. That's it. So that's got the W irons. So just going to do File 3D Print the main chassis again. Turn that custom off because I don't want it to load quite yet. So I'm going to go for runner chassis. I'm going to rename that as test 2. And the other part we need is the pivot here, isn't it? So just select that. Find the pivot body. Okay, I'm just going to turn off the crane chassis to make sure that we've got the right part. Ooh, why is that pin not showing up? Let's just check this history hasn't gone forward enough. There we go, it hasn't gone forward enough on there. Okay, so we're just going to print that part there. So File, 3D Print, and selecting that pivot, and click on OK. And we're going to call that pivot body, and then that's going to be test 2. Okay, so those are the two bits we're reprinting. As you see on the chassis, we've created the recessed wells for the wheels and this extra pin on the pivot here. Just remember I said I was going to close these up as well, didn't I? So if we just come into, it was on the runner actually, wasn't it? So if we have a look at that, so we've got to find these pins within the history now. Let's have a look, where were they? Were they towards the end? There they are. Have a look in there. So just going to close these up a little bit. So 4.75 is going to mean they're just that little bit close. I might actually come a little more than that, maybe 5 millimeters. There's still plenty of room there for this to rotate in there, but it won't allow it to rotate quite so much on the pivots left and right, which is, you know, not a bad thing there. Okay, so let's just check that that's going to have done the rest of them. Yeah, because they mirror across the mid planes there, so just changing those would have dragged those bits in. Let's go back to the top here. Make sure the history's going all the way to the end. And then we'll reset that for 3D print. The main chassis. So jumping again into Chitubox, you can see that just have to bring in the runner chassis here. We're going to reorientate it on the build plate, so we need to rotate it 90 degrees there. You can just jump in here and just stick 90 in like that. Doesn't matter whether it's plus or minus because it's the next rotation that matters. Now, if you remember, we were rotating it towards these buffers. Now, the reason I picked rotating towards these buffers, and you can see why I've done some of the design considerations that I've done as I went along, was these sleepers here that I put at an angle, I deliberately leaned them this way so that this corner here is touching, so that whole thing is supported as it prints. If I try and print from this other end, this corner isn't supported here, so that would all need supporting under there. So that you can see why I thought ahead while I was designing it that needs to be supported. The biggest issue here is not this overhang here not being supported, which is why when you go into the file validator, I just fill this little gap in here. It doesn't mean it's a slant on here, but it's one of those things that I'm having to accept. Also, if you look at the toolboxes here, I've deliberately put the hinges and mirrored them across so the hinges were both on this end, so that as it prints, they're supported from this side, whereas if you went from the other side, you'd have to support both ends of the hinges there. Okay, so you're going to have to rotate this upwards. I think we said 33 degrees was the optimal angle last time. Okay, and then we're just going to go through and add those supports. If you haven't seen me add the supports before, you can on this one you can just skip back. I think it's the last video, the video before, and you can see how I added all those supports. I've just got to do the same within Chitubox here. Okay, so I've also added a couple of extra things on the build plan. I might as well, fill it up while I'm doing it. It's got a print anyhow, so there's no point wasting the space. So apart from having the runner on here, I've added one of my flat roll wagons and the transformer that we drew in one of the previous episodes. This is the flat roll that the transformer will sit on, so it sits on the bed here, and then obviously the crane's used to move it into position at the substations. Also got the pivot arm with the pin and the couplings here for the flat roll that we've done, or I've done. So obviously I'm going to stick this on the printer. Hopefully this test will work, and you'll be able to see a video coming up shortly with the whole thing working, hopefully.